The story of Ahikar, chapter 239. But before we get into that, I guess I should explain. Ahikar is the brother that brings something to the gathering. The one who protects the and nourishes the events. So it's a fitting title for a wise person. The king arose and commanded the swordsman to do with him according to his desire. And he straightway commanded his servants to take Ahikar and the swordsman and go with him naked, that they may slay him. And when Ahikar knew for certain that he was to be slain, he sent to his wife and said to her, "Come out and meet me, and let there be with thee 1,000 young virgins, and dress them in gowns of purple and silk, that they may weep for me before my death, and prepare a table for the swordsman and for his servants, and mingle plenty of wine, that they may drink." And she did all that he commanded her. And she was very wise, clever, and prudent. And she united all possible courtesy and learning. And when the army of the king and the swordsman arrived, they found the table set in order, and the wine and luxurious viands, and they began eating and drinking till they were gorged and drunken. Then Ahikar took the swordsman aside, apart from the company, and said, "O Abu Samik, dost thou not know that when Sarhadum the king, the father of Sennacherib, wanted to kill thee, I took thee and hid thee in a certain place till the king's anger subsided, and he asked for thee." Now, part of the reason why we may not know the older than Aramea version of this is because we may not know what he is called outside, in Assyrian or something. Or one of the scholars that may have made the connection doesn't want the connection, understood. So he never passed that on. "And when I brought thee into his presence, he rejoiced in thee. And now remember thy kindness, the kindness I did thee, and know that the king will repent him about me, and will be wroth with a great wrath about my execution. For I am not guilty, and it shall be when thou shalt present me before him in his palace, thou shalt meet me with good fortune, and know that Nadon, my sister's son, has deceived me, and has done this bad deed to me, and the king will repent of having slain me. And now I have a cellar in the garden of my house, and no one knows of it. Hide me in it with the knowledge of my wife, and I have a slave in prison who deserves to be killed. Bring him out and dress him in my clothes, and command the servants, when they are drunk, to slay him. They will not know who it is they are killing, and cast away his head 100 cubits from his body, and give his body to my slaves that they may bury it, and thou shalt have laid up a great treasure with me." And then the swordsman did as Ahikar had commanded him, and he went unto the king and said to him, "May thy head live forever." Then Ahikar's wife let down to him in the hiding place every week what sufficed for him, and no one knew of it but herself. And the story was reported and repeated and spread abroad in every place of how Ahikar the sage had been slain and was dead. And all the people of that city mourned for him, and they wept and said, "Alas for thee, O Ahikar, and for thy learning and thy courtesy! How sad about thee and about thy knowledge! Where can another like thee be found? And where can there be a man so intelligent, so learned, so skilled in ruling as to resemble thee, that he may fill thy place?" But the king was repenting about Ahikar, and his repentance availed him not. And he called for Nadan and said to him, Go and take thy friends with thee, and make a mourning and a weeping for thy uncle Ahikar, and lament for him, as is customary doing, to honor his memory. But when Nadan, the foolish, the ignorant, the hard-hearted, went to the house of his uncle, he neither wept nor sorrowed nor wailed, but assembled heartless and dissolute people, and set about eating and drinking. Compare this with the account of Nadan's revelry and his beating of the servants, with Matthew 24, 48 to 51, and Luke 12, 43 to 46. You will see that the language of Ahikar has colored one of Jesus' parables. And Nadan began to seize the maidservants and the slaves belonging to Ahikar, and bound them and tortured them and drubbed them with a sore drubbing. And he did not respect the wife of his uncle, she who had brought him up like her own boy, but wanted her to fall into sin with him. But Ahikar had been cast into the hiding place, and he heard the weeping of his slaves and his neighbors, and he praised the Most High God, the Merciful One, and gave thanks. And he always prayed and besought the Most High God. And the swordsman came from time to time to Ahikar whilst he was in the midst of the hiding place. And Ahikar came and entreated him, and he comforted him and wished him deliverance. And when the story was reported in other countries that Ahikar the sage had been slain, all the kings were grieved and despised King Sennacherib, and they lamented over Ahikar, the solver of riddles. Chapter 4, the riddles of the Sphinx. What really happened to Ahikar, his return. 33 verses. And that's the indication it could be even earlier, what we're referring to. And I may have already shared a translation of some of this on my channel that could have descended into this book. And perhaps the reason why we don't know of who Ahikar is because we just don't, that's a title rather than the name. Perhaps we know him by other titles. Or perhaps we actually know his name, but... And when the king of Egypt had made sure that Ahikar was slain, he arose straightway and wrote a letter to King Sennacherib, reminding him in it of the peace and the health and the might and the honor which we wish specially for thee. May my beloved brother, King Sennacherib. I have been desiring, Akhi, if this text was in Arabic, that's what was going on there. It's not just birth brothers, there's other types of brothers, right? Ikhwan, I guess, brother. And I have been desiring to build a castle between the heaven and the earth, and I want thee to send me a wise, clever man from thyself to build it for me, and to answer me all my questions, and that I may have the taxes and the custom duties of Assyria for 3 years. And he sealed the letter and sent it to Sennacherib. He took it and read it and gave it to his viziers and to the nobles of his kingdom, and they were perplexed and ashamed. And he was wroth with a great wrath, and was puzzled about how he should act. And then he assembled the old men, and the learned men, and the wise men, and the philosophers, and the diviners, and the astrologers, and every one who was in his country, and read them the letter, and said to them, Who among you will go to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and answer him his questions? And they said to him, O our lord the king, know thou that there is none in thy kingdom who is acquainted with these questions except Ahikar, thy vizier and secretary. But as for us, we have no skill in this, unless it be Nadan, his sister's son, for he taught him all his wisdom and learning and knowledge. Call him to thee, perchance he may untie this hard knot. Then the king called Nadan, said to him, Look at this letter and understand what is in it. And when Nadan read it, he said, O my lord, who is able to build a castle between the heaven and the earth. When the king heard the speech of Nadan, he sorrowed with a great and sore sorrow, and stepped down from his throne, and sat in the ashes, and began to weep and wail over Ahikar, saying, O my grief, O Ahikar, who didst know the secrets and riddles, woe is for me, woe is me for thee, O Ahikar, O teacher of my country and ruler of my kingdom, where shall I find the like? O Ahikar, O teacher of my country, where shall I turn for thee? Woe is me for thee. How did I destroy thee? And I listened to the talk of a stupid, ignorant boy, without knowledge, without religion, without manliness. And and again, for myself. Who can give thee to me just for once? Bring me word what Ahikar, that he is alive, and I would give him the half of my kingdom. Well, a lot of people lie straight on the spot, right? But, actual verifiable word, of course. Like I saw this thing and this guy's like, why am I doing this? I could just say I did that. And saying, it's not just people who are sorcerers saying, I will go do magic for you, and they never actually do, but they tell you they do, and it works just the same. Yeah, I mean, you don't really notice the difference. Same thing goes for secular tax people, but in general, you want to remove the temptation, you go check out the work that they've done or are doing before you, pay them or something, or, but don't lord over them, no one likes that. Whence is this to me, O Ahikar, that I might see thee for just once, that I may take my fill of gazing at thee and delighting in thee? O my grief for thee to all time, O Ahikar, how I have killed thee, how I have tarried not in thy case till I had seen the end of the matter. And the king went on weeping night and day, and when the swordsman saw the wrath of the king and his sorrow for Ahikar, his heart was softened towards him, and he approached into his presence and said to him, O my lord, command thy servants to cut off my head. Then said the king to him, Woe to thee, O Abu Samik, what is thy fault? And the swordsman said unto him, O my master, every slave who acts contrary to the word of his master is killed, and I have acted contrary to thy command. Then the king said unto him, Woe unto thee, O Abu Samik, and when hast thou acted contrary to my command? And the swordsman said unto him, O my lord, thou didst command me to kill Ahikar, and knew that thou wouldst repent thee concerning him, and that he had been wronged. And I hid him in a certain place, and killed his slave, one of his slaves, and he is now safe in the cistern, and if thou command me, I will bring him to thee. And the king said unto him, Woe unto thee, O Abu Samik, thou hast mocked me, and I am thy lord. And the swordsman said unto him, Nay, but the life of thy head, O my lord Ahikar, is safe and alive. And when the king heard that saying, he felt sure of the matter, and his head swam, and he fainted from joy, and he commanded them to bring Ahikar. And he said to the swordsman, O trusty servant, if thy speech be true, I would fain enrich thee and exalt thy dignity above that of thy friends. And the swordsman went along rejoicing till he came to Ahikar's house, and he opened the door of the hiding place and went down and found Ahikar sitting, praising God and thanking him. And he shouted to him, saying, O Ahikar, I bring the greatest joy and happiness and delight. And Ahikar said to him, What is the news, O Abu Samik? And he told him all about Pharaoh from the beginning to the end, and he took him and went to the king. And when the king looked at him, he saw him in a state of want, and that his hair had grown long like that of the wild beasts, and his nails like the claws of an eagle, and that his body was dirty with dust, and the color of his face had changed and faded, and now was like ashes. And when the king saw him, he sorrowed over him, and he rose at once, and embraced and kissed him, and wept over him, and said, Praise be to God, who hath brought thee back to me. And he consoled him and comforted him, and he stripped off his robe and put it on the swordsman, and he was very gracious to him, and gave him great wealth, and made Ahikar rest. Then said Ahikar to the king, Let my lord the king live forever. These be the deeds of the children of the world. I have reared me a palm tree, that I might lean on it, and it bent sideways, and threw me down. But, O my lord, since I have appeared before thee, let not care oppress thee. And the king said unto him, Blessed be God, who showed thee mercy, and knew that thou wast wronged, and saved thee from being, and delivered thee from being slain. But go to the warm bath, and shave thy head, and cut thy nails, and change thy clothes, and amuse thyself for the space of 40 days, that thou mayest do good to thyself, and improve the condition and the color of thy face may come back to thee. Whatever skin color and texture you have, these sorts of expressions work. Then the king stripped off his costly robe and put it on Ahikar, and Ahikar thanked God, and did obeisance to the king, and departed to his dwelling, glad and happy, praising the Most High God. And the people of his household rejoiced with him, and his friends, and every one who heard that he was alive rejoiced also. So, he topped things off with worship. But he had wisdom and knowledge, and he acted upon it. So our lives need to be sort of a mix of all three, don't they? Chapter 5, the letter of riddles, is shown to Ahikar, the boys on the Eagles. The first airplane ride off to Egypt. Ahikar, being a man of wisdom, also has a sense of humor. 57 verses. And he did as the king commanded him, and took a rest for 40 days. Then he dressed himself in his most joyous dress, most joyous clothing, and went riding to the king, with his slaves behind him, and before him rejoicing and delighted. But when Adon, his sister's son, perceived what was happening, fear took hold of him, and terror, and he was perplexed, not knowing what to do. And when Ahikar saw it, he entered into the king's presence and greeted him, and he returned the greeting and made him sit down at his side, saying to him, O my darling Ahikar, look at these letters which the king of Egypt sent to us, after he had heard that thou wast slain. They have provoked us and overcome us, and many of the people of our country have fled to Egypt, for fear of the taxes that the king of Egypt has sent to demand from us. Then Ahikar took the letter and read it, and understood all its contents. Then he said to the king, Be not wroth, O my lord. I will go to Egypt, and I will return the answers to Pharaoh, and I will display this letter to him, and I will reply to him about the taxes, and will send back all those who have run away, and I will put thy enemies to shame with the help of the Most High God, and for the happiness of thy kingdom. Now, something going on in my country with regard to taxes is that it's perfectly legal for the corporations to have the lower and middle classes pay the taxes of the people at the top. And that's what they've been doing more and more and more. So when they talk about raising taxes for the rich, they need to make it so the Walmart employees and the other people don't have to pay a higher tax run like they do. Because they're really not just paying for themselves, they're paying for other people. It's better that they figure out how to use the taxes better, And when the king heard this speech from Ahikar, he rejoiced with a great joy, and his heart was expanded, and he showed him favor. And Ahikar said to the king, Grant me a delay of 40 days, that I may consider this question and manage it. And the king permitted this. And Ahikar went to his dwelling, and he commanded the huntsmen to capture 2 young eaglets for him, and they captured them and brought them to him. And he commanded the weavers of ropes to weave 2 cables of cotton for him, each of them 2,000 cubits long, and the carpenters brought and ordered them to make 2 great boxes, and they did this. And he took 2 little lads and spent every day sacrificing lambs and feeding the eagles and the boys, and making the boys ride on the backs of the eagles. And he bound them with a firm knot and tied the cable to the feet of the eagles and let them soar upwards, little by little, every day to a distance of 10 cubits until they grew accustomed and they were educated to it. And they rose all the length of the rope until they reached the sky, the boys being on their backs. Then he drew them to himself. There was a day, it was thousands of years earlier. Could this be hearkening to when the flora and megafauna days? Because some myths remind of this. So, when Ahikar saw that his desire was fulfilled, he charged the boys that when they were born aloft to the sky, They were to shout, saying, "Bring us clay and stone, that we may build a castle for King Pharaoh, for we are idle." And Ahikar was never done training them and exercising them till they had reached the utmost point of skill. Then leaving them, he went to the king and said to him, "O my lord, thy work is finished. According to thy desire, arise with me, that I may show thee the wonder." So the king sprang up and sat with Ahikar, and went to a wide place, and sent to bring the eagles and the boys. And Ahikar tied them and let them off into the air all the length of the ropes, and they began to shout as he had taught them, and he drew them to himself and put them in their places. And the king and those who were with him wondered with a great wonder. And the king kissed Ahikar between his eyes and said to him, "Go in peace, my beloved, O pride of my kingdom, to Egypt, and answer the questions of Pharaoh, and overcome him by the strength of the Most High God." Then he bade him farewell, and took his troops and his army, and the young men and the eagles, and went towards the dwellings of Egypt. And when he had arrived, he turned toward the country of the king. And when the people of Egypt knew that Sennacherib had sent a man of his privy council to talk with Pharaoh and to answer his questions, they carried the news to King Pharaoh, and he sent a party of his privy counselors to bring him before him. And he came and entered into the presence of Pharaoh, and did obeisance to him, as it is fitting to do to kings. And he said unto him, "O my lord the king, Sennacherib the king hails thee with abundance of peace and might and honor, and he has sent me, who am one of his slaves, that I may answer thee thy questions, and may fulfill all thy desire. For thou hast sent to seek from my lord the king a man who will build thee a castle between heaven and earth. And I, by help of the Most High God, and thy noble favor, and the power of my lord the king, will build it for thee, as thou hast desired. But, O my lord the king, what thou hast said in it about the taxes of Egypt for 3 years. Now the stability of a kingdom is strict justice, and if thou winnest, and my hand hath no skill in replying to thee, then my lord the king will send thee the taxes which thou hast mentioned. And if I shall have answered thee in thy questions, it shall remain for thee to send whatever thou hast mentioned to my lord the king." And when Pharaoh heard that speech, he wondered and was perplexed by the freedom of his tongue and the pleasantness of his speech. And King Pharaoh said to him, "O man, what is thy name?" And he said, "Thy servant is Ahikar, and I a little ant of the ants of the king Sennacherib." And Pharaoh said to him, "Had thy lord no one of higher dignity than thee, that he has sent me a little ant to reply to me and converse with me?" And Ahikar said to him, "O my lord the king, I would to God Most High that I may fulfill what is on thy mind, for God is with the weak, that he may confound the strong." Then Pharaoh commanded that they should prepare a dwelling for Ahikar, and supply him with provender, meat, and drink, and all that he needed. Does Ahikar, does that mean father of the people? And when it was finished, 3 days afterwards, Pharaoh clothed himself in purple and red, and sat on his throne. And all his viziers and the magnates of his kingdom were standing with their hands crossed, and their feet closed together, and their hands bowed. And Pharaoh sent to fetch Ahikar. And when he was presented to him, he did obeisance before him, and kissed the ground in front of him. And King Pharaoh said to him, "O Ahikar, whom am I like? And the nobles of my kingdom, to whom are they like?" And Ahikar said to him, "O my lord the king, thou art like the idol Bel, and the nobles of thy kingdom are like his servants." And he said to him, "Go and come back hither tomorrow." So Ahikar went as King Pharaoh commanded him. And on the morrow Ahikar went into the presence of Pharaoh, and did obeisance, and stood before the king. And Pharaoh was dressed in a red color, and the nobles were dressed in white. And Pharaoh said to him, "O Ahikar, who am I like? And the nobles of my kingdom, to whom are they like?" And Ahikar said to him, "O my lord, thou art like the sun, and thy servants are like its beams." And Pharaoh said to him, "Go to thy dwelling, and come hither tomorrow." Then Pharaoh commanded his court to wear pure white, and Pharaoh was dressed like them, and sat upon his throne, and he commanded them to fetch Ahikar, and he entered and sat down before him. And Pharaoh said to him, O Ahikar, who am I like? And my nobles, to whom are they like? And Ahikar said to him, O my lord, thou art like the moon, and thy nobles are like the planets and the stars. And Pharaoh said to him, Go, and tomorrow be thou here. The Pharaoh commanded his servants to wear robes of various colors, and Pharaoh wore a red velvet dress and sat on his throne. Dress is probably not the right word. I don't know, is thobe the word they're using? Because dress makes it sound like he's wearing women's clothes, but he's not. And sat on his throne and commanded them to fetch Ahikar, and he entered and did obeisance before him. And he said, O Ahikar, whom I like, and my armies, to whom are they like? And he said, O my lord, thou art like the month of April, and thy armies are like its flowers. And the king heard it and rejoiced with a great joy, and said, O Ahikar, the first time thou didst compare me to the idol Bel, and my nobles to his servants, and the second time thou didst compare me to the sun, and my nobles to the sunbeams, and the third time thou didst compare me to the moon, and my nobles to the planets and the stars, and the fourth time thou didst compare me to the month of April, and my nobles to the flowers. But now, O Ahikar, tell me thy lord, King Sennacherib, whom is he like, and to the nobles of whom are they like? And Ahikar shouted with a loud voice and said, Be it far from me to make mention of my lord the king, and thou seated on thy throne, but get up on thy feet, that I may tell thee whom my lord the king is like, and to whom his nobles are like. And Pharaoh was perplexed by the freedom of his tongue and the boldness in his answering. Then Pharaoh arose from his throne and stood before Ahikar and said to him, Tell me now, that I may perceive whom thy lord the king is like, and his nobles to whom they are like. And Ahikar said to him, My lord is the God of heaven, and his nobles are the lightnings and the thunder, and when he wills, the rains blow, and the rain falls, and he commands the thunder, and it lightens and rains, and he holds the sun and gives not its light, and it gives not its light, and the moon and the stars, and they circle not. Well, at least from our perspective sometimes. And he commands the tempest, and it blows, and the rain falls, and it tramples on April, and destroys its flowers and its houses. So is this March, April, the month, or is this April, May, the month? And when Pharaoh heard this speech, he was greatly perplexed, and was wroth with a great wrath, and said to him, O man, tell me the truth, and let me know who thou really art. And he told him the truth, I am Ahikar the scribe, greatest of the privy counselors of King Sennacherib, and I am his vizier, and the governor of his kingdom, and his chancellor. And he said to him, Thou hast told the truth in this saying. But we have heard of Ahikar, that King Sennacherib has slain him, and yet thou dost seem to be alive and well. And Ahikar said to them, Yea, so it was, but praise be to God, who knoweth what is hidden, for my lord the king commanded me to be killed. And he believed the word of profligate men, but the Lord delivered me. And blessed is he who trusteth in him. And Pharaoh said to Ahikar, Go, and tomorrow be thou here, and tell me a word that I have never heard from my nobles, nor from the people of my kingdom and my country. Chapter 6. The ruse succeeds. Ahikar answers every question of Pharaoh. The boys on the eagles are the climax of the day. Wit, so rarely found in the ancient scriptures, is revealed in verses 34 to 35. But we have 50 verses here, which could be symbolic divisions or something. But and Ahikar went to his dwelling and wrote a letter, saying in it from this wise, From Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and Nineveh, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, Peace be to thee, O my brother, and what we make known to thee by this is that a brother has need of his brother, and kings of each other, and my hope from thee is that thou wouldest lend me 900 talents of gold, for I need it for the victualling of some, that the soldiers, that I may spend it upon them, and after a little while I will send it thee. And he folded the letter and presented it on the morrow to Pharaoh. And when he saw it, he was perplexed, and said to him, Verily, I've never heard anything like this language from anyone. Then Ahikar said to him, Truly this is a debt which thou owest to my lord the king. And Pharaoh accepted this, saying, O Ahikar, it is the like of thee, who are honest in the service of kings. Blessed be God, who hath made thee perfect in wisdom, and hath adorned thee with philosophy and knowledge. Because certainly knowledge and the ability to work it out and form understandings of it is not just something to lord over people with. It's something to, be of mutual benefit.